Hello, sirs and ma'ams. This is Dumpster Fire from the future, and I'm here to give you a disclaimer. What you're about to hear is a tier list that a lot of what you're about to hear will no longer apply if you're listening to this. As of today, recording this, they announced a bunch of balance changes, which I was almost expecting they might do, but they're rebalancing just about every single character, which is going to throw everything completely out of whack. So, if you're listening to this now, it might be best to just use this as a baseline, or use this for historical purposes, or just maybe use this to maybe gauge roughly what I think of them in other situations. But just know that this is definitely not a concrete or tier list or accurate of what the game will be like when you probably are listening to this. But I still spent a lot of time in this video, and I wanted to still push it out because I didn't want it to go to waste, and some people still wanted to see it anyway, so I figured I might as well do it. If there's some awkward lack of editing at any point, I apologize. I wanted to try to get this out at least before these balance changes came out. Speaking of those balance changes, after I do this tier list, I'll give my brief thoughts about what I think about them, so I guess you can stay tuned for that, or you can just scroll to the end, it doesn't matter to me. Anyway, on with the commentary I recorded a few days ago. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. I apologize for my absence the last while. I wanted to make another video, but I didn't really have any gameplay footage to provide, so I decided, hey, it's been a while since I've updated my tier list. It's been over a year, a lot of new characters have been introduced, some of them have been nerfed. The last one, heck, it was so long ago, Werehog wasn't even a thing yet, so I figured, hey, might as well take the time to rank all 67 of these characters. Not a live stream this time, I couldn't really think of when to do it, and I wanted to get a little bit more elaboration about all this stuff. So I figured, hey, I'm just gonna just try to make a tier list, rank them from worst to best, and then explain things. I'm going to be splitting them up in the following tiers, and this is just, I guess, kind of roughly why I put them in there. F tier, I think, are the absolute worst characters this game has to offer. E tier, I think, are pretty bad characters, but they're not completely useless, they still have a niche. D tier characters are not that good, but can be good in some situations. C tier characters, I think, are okay-ish, but can be outclassed. B tier characters, I think, are pretty good, but may have a few key flaws. A-tier characters are generally meta, but may have some issues in terms of consistency. S-tier characters are the best characters I don't necessarily think are broken. X-tier characters I think are broken. And then there's Z-tier, which are my least favorite characters in the characters, so I think are priority number one to be nerfed. So let's get right into it. Just remember, this is my own opinion. I did ask some people about just if this tier list looked fine beforehand. Some people who I think are way better than me at this game at this point. Just to make sure, hey, do I have the general right idea for things? But in general, hey, if you disagree with something, feel free to put it in the comments. I'm always willing to look for feedback, and hey, please enjoy. This is going to take a while to get into, so I'm just going to stop talking and get right into it. Starting off with Lissa was, in my opinion, the worst character in the game. We have Gamma. He's down here mostly because his unique jump makes him a character that I would avoid in most situations. Gamma takes a bit longer to get off the ground than everyone else in exchange for hovering, and while this sounds helpful for being able to stay in the air longer to dodge stuff, it hurts more than it helps because it throws off your timing just completely. Random obstacle hits are common, you don't have as much time to react as a trap in front of you, and if you're boosting, you especially are going to struggle because it feels like it takes ages to get off the ground. And what also doesn't help is that even if his jump was normal, he still is not that good. Electro Boost is a pretty good boost, but Missile Launcher and Laser Blaster are not very impressive attacks, and they leave it without a proper trap, so he can't really hold people off. Ultimately, though, he's not outclassed, and he may not have just straight-up unviable attacks, but if I use any other character, there are things with Gamma that I have to worry about that I don't have to worry about with literally anyone else. The worst character that does not have strange physics attached to him, in my opinion, is Storm. Storm has not a good kit. He has Whirlwind, which a lot of other characters have, making him pretty outclassed, and Wind Boost plus Zap Trap does not get the job done. Zap Trap is a really bad move most of the time. It's only good in the lead, and there are better moves to use in the lead because it only does chip damage, and if it needs to catch up, you need a lot more than chip damage because Wind Boost not being good. The thing is, I really don't see him being good in any situation because there is a character that exists with his kit but with a good boost, and that character isn't good either, and if anything else gets bugged, then he busts a character that's pretty overpowered. So overall, this character's been bad, he is bad, and he's probably going to remain bad. Do not use him. And rounding out F tier is Rouge and Witch Rouge. They're both held back by the same thing, which is Booby Trap alongside an unreliable attack. Booby Trap is kind of in a weird state. I don't think it's that bad despite the fact it doesn't do damage, but you need to have a decent move to pair up with it, and neither of these characters have it. Draco-Lantern hits hard, but it's hard to aim at people when you only get a singular pickup, making it pretty difficult. And Rouge just has Lightning, which is the worst move to pair up with it. Getting hit by Lightning opens up a slot, making the entire thing kind of pointless. I ultimately put Witch Rouge ahead of normal Rouge, even though Rouge has a decent boost and Witch Rouge has a bad boost. Which, granted, Witch Rouge having a bad boost certainly leaves her in this tier, and if she's there, Rouge is there too. Starting off D tier, we have Tikal. Tikal is a niche, barely, but she does have enough of a purpose to save herself from F tier. I don't need to tell you that Captive Light is bad due to not dealing damage, and in addition to that, she has a slow boost and projectile with limited range, so she can often feel pretty helpless. But she's not completely inept. I do like Chow Guardians when you're in the lead, which when combined with Captive Light can actually be pretty helpful. But the fact that I have to consider Captive Light helpful in any sense is honestly really bad. It's only good at stopping boosts and making those Chow Guardians harder to see. I mean, I guess Chow Chase isn't always awful either, but there's just so many races where Tikal does feel like an F tier character. She's only saved by the occasional situation where she does have some use. Next up, we got Zaz. I know some people think this guy is good, but he is not good at all. He has one of the worst forward offenses in the game, probably second only to Rouge, because all he has is Modal Bug, which definitely does not get the job done on its own. The only real way I think he can really do things well is if he uses Star Trail early and then tries to maintain that lead, but with 7 speed, people will eventually catch up, and even then, he'll end up getting body blocked a lot of the time at the start of the race. Electro Boost is nice, you need to get a quick fix at the start, but near the end, when you have 100 rings, it's not going to be helping you much. With Modal Bug, you are screwed. Again, once he is in the lead, Star Trail is okay at holding people off from catching up, especially in confined spaces, but the fact it despawns so quickly can cause some issues, and it'll be long gone before, say, a Supersonic will have to worry about it, and he can not be detangled at all. If he had a better projectile, or he still had 9 speed, or really anything, this wouldn't be as much of a concern, but he doesn't, and he's pretty comfortably in E tier. Next is Longclaw. Longclaw only really has one good move, which is Cyclone Charge, which has a lot of interesting traits. If you hit it, you can get a speed boost from it, and it also acts as a normal auto mine. It does wind damage, which is nice, and it's actually pretty hard to see on the opponent's screen because they changed it apparently intentionally to make it so other players' Cyclone Charges are a lot harder to see, just so it's designated like, hey, this isn't yours. But I almost wanted to rank her higher, but then I remembered she still has the combination of Lightning and Wind Boost, which is a really, really awful combo, and ultimately, I think that she has a problem wherein she's trying to rely on Cyclone Charge to take care of too many flaws, and ultimately I think that those flaws just still shine through too often. If she had something else, I could see Cyclone Charge working, but I don't think that move is quite good enough to make up for what would otherwise be one of the worst characters in the game. Next up, we got Cream. Cream would be a lot higher if she wasn't stuck with Buddy Boost. In the right hand, she could certainly be a bit of a threat, but she has a very high learning curve, and in my opinion, it's just not worth it at all. And to make matters worse, their intention to buff Bunny Boost actually, in my opinion, made it worse, because just timing those 7 swipes, even if they give you more speed, just isn't feasible a lot of the time. And it sucks, because Chownado is a pretty useful auto mine, and Chow Attack is pretty good even if you can't spread them around because of singular pickups and they only go into one lane at all, but that'd be enough almost if he wasn't forced to be in a situation where you almost never have to boost, So then you have to be in the lead, and by that point there are better characters in the lead. I just think she's way too hard to use and just not worth it overall. Next up is our lowest common Amy. I like Amy, she's actually my favorite character, but she's definitely not good in this game right now, and that has to do with her damage output. It's pretty bad. Ice Mines are not good enough to get the job done, and Ice Mine plus Lightning is not a very good combo. Yeah, Lightning can be annoying, and Ice Mines can sometimes be inconvenient, but, like, it's much better to just be, like, hit by E-Mines, or if you're frozen, most characters have a better thing to combo you with afterwards than just Lightning. It also means that she just can't really take care of crowds that easily. Sometimes it feels like you're just hitting people for the whole game, and you still end up losing. And then she doesn't really have a great way of catching up to, you know, kind of compensate for that. Ice Boost is mediocre, and again, just the fact that she doesn't have a very good projectile really holds her back. I don't think she's awful. She can occasionally surprise you with some decent gameplay, but I just think that there's characters who have a much easier time accomplishing what she attempts to do. Next up, we got Movie Sonic. Now, Movie Sonic has the same kit as Storm aside from the boost, but fortunately, instead of one of the worst boosts in the game, it's one of the better ones. Unfortunately, other than that, he runs into the same issues as Storm. Zap Trap is just not very good, and Whirlwind is way too common of a move to really give him any purpose. Also, Ring Portal shenanigans are just not recommended. If you want to take advantage of that kit for some reason, Movie Super Sonic exists and is way better in terms of boosting. And then if you want to just use Ring Portal, you can just use Movie Knuckles, who has way better attacks in my opinion. He isn't necessarily awful, but there are a lot of situations where it can be fairly helpless because I just don't think that using Whirlwind is enough on its own, especially when all you're adding to that is just Zap Trap. Next is Excalibur Sonic. Excalibur Sonic is a character who I would not consider very reliable. I like his boost, it's actually low-key pretty good, but that's about all he has, and there are characters with better boosts. Soul Search is nice if you're right beside the opponent, but because it has a lack of range, its hitbox is kind of weird. It's not the best move out there, but then at the same time, this is the only way of reliably hitting people. King's Judgment is bad. It's really only a singular pickup, and even though it does do good damage, it's just so easy to dodge, and considering that's Excalibur Sonic's only way to hit someone who's more than an inch in front of him, just does not get the job done. This guy's gotten some buffs, and he's admittedly better than he used to be, but I just don't think I can really put him in D when he runs into so many issues with characters who just have so much easier time hitting people, and then when his only good trait is something that a lot of characters have access to something better anyway. Next we have Ice Slicer Jet. This character is so forgettable, I actually made this entire video, but then remembered I completely forgot to rank Ice Slicer Jet. Anyway, he only has ice moves, and unlike Chaos, he does not have any particularly great ice moves. Trap Shot is a fun move. However, it only does so much because you need to be very precise with it, and that's really your only way of catching up because Ice Mines can only do so much and only have so much range. Ice Boost is not that good, and I mean, you can do work with Trap Shot. You can either land it on someone, you can try to maybe get people on a wall, put on a dash pad. You can pick up 2, and it does freeze actually for a very long time, but that's all he has, and ultimately I think just compared to Ice Wave, there are definitely better moves you can use, making him not a recommended option, especially now when I think you need more than just ice moves, unless the ice move is Ice Wave. Next is Classic Sonic. Classic Sonic can almost give the impression of being a decent character, but then you run into the issues induced by having invincibility with a low acceleration stat. Of all the characters stuck with this awful boost, Classic Sonic has the worst projectile, so that gives him a lot of issues catching up. However, he's not like completely awful. Tornado's a good trap and actually does function pretty well with invincibility. Get some rings, and you can also invincibility through your own tornadoes, which is probably not the worst thing ever, but I mean, there are other commons with tornadoes that don't have such a bad boost, and even if they're not very impressive, I do think they're generally better options because with Classic Sonic, if you get hit, sometimes you just lost. Next up, we got Knuckles. Knuckles may look like a pretty decent character because he has explosive mines and fireballs, and heck, he's pretty easy to level up. but he's not. He feels so bad to use, and it's entirely to blame because of his 7 speed, 4 acceleration, and invincibility. You have almost no margin for error when using him in the race when you're this slow. And if you get hit once between your invincibilities, or even if your invincibility could stop before you activate it, you're probably done for, especially if you're playing against someone like Tangle. I almost wanted to not put him in this tier solely because of Explosive Mines being pretty good if you're in the lead. I mean, if somebody hits someone who's trying to catch up, they're probably not going to catch up. But just using him on occasion earlier in the season, he feels so awful. And especially in this meta, there are cases where there's no way he's possibly going to win certain games. Next up, we got Eggman. I do think Eggman has a somewhat interesting moveset in the sense that Honor Guard, I think, is actually a kind of underrated attack now that it does notable damage. And the boost is pretty good. Not amazing, but good. However, Honor Guard is also situational because it can't be used in certain areas because of it being destroyed if it hits a wall. And then that's his only that's even his more reliable attack because Valkyrie is just bad in almost all situations unless you're like on Mighty Mayhem or something. So in some cases, Eggman can be a bit of a sitting duck. I have on occasion seen people use Eggman pretty well, and admittedly Honor Guard, if used in the right spot, is pretty difficult to dodge, but even though he's no longer a genuinely awful character like he was in release, I still think he could use some room for improvement, and ultimately there are way more consistent characters out there you can use. Starting off D tier, I'm just going to rank 3 characters together. We got Tails, then Charmy, then Silver. Why I rank them together? They all feel almost the same to me. They all have Tornado, they're all commons, they all have bad stats, and I really think that if you're using them, it's just because of those reasons, really. I rank Silver of the best of the 3 because Confusion Boost is much better than Wind Boost. His stats are awful. He has 6 speed and mediocre durability, even though his kit isn't that good, and that holds him back more than you would expect, honestly. I also rank Charmy ahead of Tails because Whirlwind, I think, is better than Motobug. Even if Motobug being faster can be helpful at times, still, they can get the job done early, but later on, once you find more powerful characters, they can struggle just because they don't have enough going for them. Whisper is more annoying than good. Green Hover is a relatively unimpressive boost, and with 2 projectiles, although they can actually hold people off pretty decently, are not amazing. Pink Spikes requires some precision to use in a consistent manner, and is the only way she's going to really close the gap between herself and First because of the fact that Cyan Laser, even though it's decent in terms of electric damage, is still not that powerful, and does more, honestly, when it's going backwards than going forwards. You're not going to pass someone most of the time. Good precision can go a long way with her. I have seen her do decent, but it's often not really worth the trouble when there are easier ways to do this than Pink Spikes will. For example, I just think Auto Mines generally outclass something like Pink Spikes. Still, she's not necessarily bad and can be a nuisance with proper play, but there's definitely better characters out there. Next is Lantern Silver. The best way to describe Lantern Silver would be unreliable. His acceleration is nice, but I'm not a big fan of 7 speed like with Zaz. Pyromine is a pretty strong auto mine, but the AoE effect can backfire on you if you're not careful with it. And then there's Firework Flare, which is somehow even less reliable. The red one is good, the blue one is sometimes good, and the yellow one might be the absolute worst attack in the entire game. Meaning that even if you hit someone, you're not necessarily going to get anything out of it, and you're not necessarily even going to know what's going to happen. And Desync screws over this guy hard in both his attacks, in my opinion. I think once you work around everything, he can be alright, but you can do better. There are definitely more consistent characters out there with higher ceilings and higher floors. Next we have Blaze. With Lava Bomb and a boost that isn't Bunny Boost, Blaze can do some decent work compared to the other non-special Automine character Cream, but compared to all the specials, doesn't really stand out to it, and she has a lot of crippling flaws. Fire Whirl is not good, and it's only a singular pickup. It's mostly bad because it's a singular pickup. Force Acceleration is awful, Fire Boost does not feel good on Force Acceleration, and that is not a good combination at all. Lava Bomb does allow her to have a hard-hitting move that's to be used in the lead and can be timed pretty well, which is very nice in this meta, but she may slowly lose that lead to the 8 speed. She's not necessarily bad, but she is limited, and she's a worse version of several specials. Next, we have Spring Cream. Spring Cream used to be top tier almost solely because of Hedge Maze being so ridiculous, but now that that move is balanced, and again, the Bunny Boost quote-unquote buff happened, she's not that impressive anymore. I don't think she's awful, even though Hedge Maze has gotten some pretty major nerfs. I still think it's a decent move, but I think I like it more than Chow Nado when you're stuck with Bunny Boost. And Chow Attack is pretty good, but ultimately she was a one-trick pony, and now that one trick is balanced, so now she's like a half-trick pony. I don't even know how to describe it. Either way, there are definitely better characters out there. She's not awful, but again, she can be pretty hard to use. You don't have a ton of margin for error, especially if you, God forbid, hit yourself with your own Hedge Maze. You're screwed if that happens, so be careful using her. And finishing off D tier, we have Linebacker Omega. Linebacker Omega, not surprisingly, is very hard to get out of the lead. Brutal Barrier is a double pickup move that grants a shield and AoE effect, meaning that he can stay in first for pretty much the whole game unless your opponent has very strict timing. However, he might also be the absolute worst character at catching up. He has 4 acceleration just like Knuckles alongside invincibility, but he also has Savage Throw, which is not good enough to get the job done on its own. It's only singular pickup. He also can't really do anything to stop a Supersonic or an invincible character from boosting past him at the end, which is pretty bad. But with anything else, it can put a hard stop to the shenanigans if he stays in the lead. But again, if somebody does get you between that, you're probably screwed. Starting off C tier, we have Sir Gawain. I know Sir Gawain has a really, really bad reputation. Some people consider this guy awful, but I think he's pretty underrated. The boost could definitely be an issue, but it's not necessarily terrible. High level it could do alright because you can pick up 3 of them, and by that point it's pretty good. Explosive Mines are also always good to have, and his projectile is also pretty good. That with the combination of Explosive Mines can actually do some pretty good job holding people off, or just catching people off guard, doing some good damage. That said, I think the issue is that when he has a bad race, it's really bad. Using a few dual wield dashes isn't too bad, but if you're having to use way too many of them, it can feel pretty unwieldy because you're probably having to put a lot of effort into catching up, especially compared to others. But it's also not impossible to close it, and overall, I still think he's okay-ish. Not really recommended, though, compared to other characters. Next up, we got Nutcracker Silver. You may not realize it, but Nutcracker Silver actually is one of the absolute best boosts in the game. He also has little else going for him. Ice Mines are not very good on their own, and Psychic Surprise, despite doing pretty good damage, is not amazing damage, and does not complement Ice Mine as much as you think. I often had it spawn right in front of someone or just past them. And it's difficult to use because you want to hope that you don't hit walls or a desync player before launching it off. It may not matter if you can't land the hits though, because you can just pass someone and you're also at protection. Make no mistake though, if this guy had Ice Boost or something like that, I would have put this guy in E and had no hesitation, but the boost is still something. Next we have Lucky Whisper, who I'm not entirely sure why she exists. Ultimately, she's exactly the same as Whisper, except she has slightly different stats, and her boost attracts rings. Now, this is actually a decent upgrade. Instead of her boost being relatively bad, I think it's relatively good. And you may think, hey, this makes her amazing because this fixes one of her problems, but then you still run into similar issues again. Pink Spikes and Silent Laser only does so much, often requires too much precision, and there are way simpler ways to do what you may want to be doing with them. I had her actually higher initially, but when I was talking to some of my friends about this, just in terms of feedback, she was most commonly the one I had ranked too high, and after thinking about it a bit, I do kind of understand why. Whisper's problems are not just the boost, it has to do with really everything, and this doesn't fix everything. Next up, we got Paladin Amy. You may be tempted to rank her higher because she's, without a doubt, one of the most annoying characters in the game, but overall, I think she's a mixed bag. Both of her attacks are relatively strong and hit foes nearby her, and they have multiple pickups, and Whirlwind in particular is a really powerful move, strongest wind move in the game to boot, and has a lot of traits going for it. However, she's crippled pretty hard by having invincibility. And this is not only invincibility, this is invincibility combined with attacks that only travels so far, and she doesn't have any 3-lane traps or anything like that. She can definitely do work. I honestly think Whirlwind Wallop would need a nerf and invincibility got above. but most of the work people do is just ending up gatekeeping the heck out of people, and I'm not ranking people based off their ability to gatekeep, I'm ranking them based off their ability to win, and she's definitely a mixed bag in that regard. Next up we got SPO. SPO's an all-around decent character since his buff. His stats are good, he has a good boost, he has a reliable projectile, and he has a decent trap. Just decent. The worst thing about him is the fact that his trap doesn't take any rings and overall isn't that strong, but it can still do a decent job of causing interference overall. That being said, there exist characters that play similarly but can do a better job overall. For example, I don't really think that what he does exceeds that of what Explosive Minds do, but he's still fine, just has a kind of low ceiling. Next, I have Omega. There isn't necessarily anything I'd say is particularly wrong with Omega, but he lacks any particularly good traits other than Explosive Minds, and he's not the best user of them. He's not even the best user of the combination of Explosive Minds and Electro Boost because two other characters have them, and they both have better projectiles than Motobug, which is not that good. 8 speed is also fine, but for some reason the fact he doesn't have 9 or 10 can feel a little clunky. He's one of the better commons ultimately. I think that he's, of course, only one of them is higher than him. But eventually you'll have better versions than him, even if you don't invest in specials, and they'll generally perform better than he will. Next is Elf Classic Sonic, who is a decent character overall, albeit a character with only one particularly good trait. Flu Shot reaches far, hits hard, and isn't the easiest thing in the world to dodge, and that does a lot of the heavy lifting. Other than that, I don't really think he sticks out that much. Motobugs are not that impressive, Ice Boost is not that impressive, and his stats are oddly low despite what I just said. If you're into this type of stuff about being outclassed, Movie Knuckles is also, in my opinion, better in every single way. Still, Flu Shot is annoying enough and the rest of his moves aren't bad enough to where I think you still have to respect him in matches, even though he is admittedly quite rare. I do think the fact that he is rare, even though he's one of the first specials, does say something because most people can probably nearly max this guy out at this point. Next we have Elite Agent Rouge, who can seriously be a great frontrunner, but I also don't think she can accomplish quite what Parental Sonic can. First of all, Motobug is not nearly as useful as Harvest Time, and Bat Bombs are generally easier to dodge than Dead End because you just have to slide under them, giving her a harder time accomplishing that main niche. However, she has a better, as an actually good boost, provided you don't rely on it too much. And if you do let hits with Bat Bomb, use it on rails, maybe try to stop someone while they're boosting, they actually hit pretty hard, and you don't have to get hit by multiple, you just gotta hit by 1 or 2 and you're done. I had a hard time figuring out whether to put her in C or B. I actually got a pretty compelling argument for B tier, but this was also, I think, she was a little bit better in Infinite meta, because if an Infinite was trying to Phantom Dash past you, then Bat Bomb was something they really had to worry about, but I think that now that that isn't as common and a lot of the flying boosts are just invincible, I do think this knocks her down slightly, but if you want to put her in B, I think that's fair. Although, I would also like to see more of this character, because she's extremely rare. And capping off C tier, we had Modern Sonic. Modern Sonic was one of the toughest calls between C and B, because he is very much so a character that has some very big positives and very big negatives. The Ice Mine Fireball combo is still pretty good, but at this point I do think his stats and power sneakers coming off those stats do hurt him just a little bit too much and put him in B. He's definitely the best common. I do think he can get some success, but you do not have a ton of margin for error, and he's not the best at holding people off, despite the fact that he's fast. In my opinion, even though he isn't strictly outclassed by anyone, I do think you are generally better off trying to find a character with explosive mindset that just hits immediately harder, because I do think that just sometimes Sonic cannot hold off people enough, and sometimes he has some difficulties catching up. Again, definitely the best common, but he does have enough flaws where I can't quite put him in B. Starting off B tier, we have a character that I moved pretty far down from the last tier, Shadow. Now, Shadow is a character that is almost entirely just Stormclaws, but Stormclaws are pretty good to have as your only particularly good trait. Yeah, it's track dependent to a degree, and with the proper deployment though, they can be very difficult to dodge, even if you see them coming. Shadow is probably the worst user of them in the game. He doesn't have a lot going for them outside of Klaus and the fact that he is the second fastest character in the game statistically. However, even though Lightning and Power Sneakers are not that impressive, they aren't terrible compliments for him in my experience. Lightning can pressure people into Storm Clouds and generally prove to be pretty annoying, especially people trying to catch up to him, and Power Sneakers honestly feels pretty good with 9 acceleration. Still, this guy's main niche is mostly just Storm Clouds, and you can't be bad sometimes, and there are other characters who can do what he does better, but I still think he's decent overall. Continuing on the Shadow trade, next we have Vampire Shadow. Vampire Shadow is a marginal improvement over normal Shadow, but I wouldn't go that much further. You'd think not having Lightning and not having Power Sneakers would make him clearly better, but as someone who has a relatively high level Vampire Shadow, it's not as much of an improvement as you'd expect. Jack-o'-lantern is indeed not lightning, but it's slow. And while Electro Boost is useful, near the end of the game, you're honestly probably better off with Power Sneakers. Generally speaking, I'd say he's probably the better character early in the game, but worse later in the game unless you're really precise with Jack-o'-lantern. The early game advantages do give him the edge, but not enough to put him that much higher than normal Shadow at all. Next up, we got Jet. Jet is a very speedy character, some pretty useful utility. All his moves take rings, he's got 10 speed, and then furthermore, Bostrelson slows people down if they're in that trail, Tornado blocks people out from dash pads, so it could just make him even harder to catch up to. Yeah, his durability isn't great, Wind Boost is pretty lousy, and I think he has a kind of bad matchup versus some characters such as Tangle, but he is still a very good frontrunner with decent offense coming from behind. Competition is also a factor. Jet is much better than your typical Tornado character, especially if you're not including specials, so if you want to take advantage of what Tornado provides, this is definitely your best bet unless you want to resort to a character that is probably not that impressive. He does have some flaws, but I have seen him do very well, even in comparison, especially in comparison to some other characters in this tier. Next up, we have Santa Big. I don't think he's significantly better than Elf Classic Sonic, but I do think he is generally better, and he does actually have a purpose to be used over Moving Knuckles. For one, his acceleration is 9 instead of 3, which is nice, but the main thing is that Frozen Chopper Chomp, despite generally not being the best, can combo people with Flu Shot. Also, it travels a really, really long way for whatever reason, although I don't know how much this helps him out, because despite the fact that that boost may look like Umbrella Boost, it's actually closer to Wind Boost. It's really not that good. If he did have Umbrella Boost, he'd honestly be pretty overpowered, but he doesn't, so just keep that in mind. He's still good overall, though, I'd say. Next up, we got Quarterback Zavik. He's a pretty rare character who I think might have some untapped potential, but for now, I'm just going to put him in B tier because he has a pretty nice combination of traits overall. He has an actually good boost alongside Lava Bomb, which puts him at an advantage to Blaze, and Lava Bomb's a great tool in this metagame. The boost is like dual-wield dash, except it was actually good and a little bit more reliable, and even though it can sometimes run into a similar caliber of issues, it takes a while to get where you need to go, it's a lot better than Fire Boost coming out for acceleration. I cannot stress that enough. Again, I feel like it could be A tier, but there's just not that many Quarterback Zaviks out there, and I don't want to put a completely unproven character in there. When I see one, he doesn't, make me wince because I'm not expecting a ton. And Savage Throw is also not that impressive, even though, once again, better than Fire Whirl, at least. And rounding out B tier, we have All-Star Amy and Slugger Sonic. Although they're not easy to use, they both rank high due to Home Run, specifically due to a Home Run glitch. Alongside the fact that hitting all the bases can go a long way up when you catch up, it's also the game's only stackable boost. I'll let you figure out how to do that yourself, but either way, other than that, they have relatively solid kits and they both have 10 speed. But really, they'd rank a lot lower if these aspects couldn't be abused, even if admittedly I'm kind of terrible at using Home Run. I give All-Star Amy the slight edge due to being one of the only Tornado characters other than Punk Zaz not having a bad boost or bad stats, even though Slugger Sonic does have Ice Mine plus Strikeout, which is a pretty nice combo, but really, it's pretty interchangeable, and honestly, you can just go with which one you like more. Starting off A tier, we got Treasure Hunter Knuckles. Treasure Hunter Knuckles has Rocky Road, which is hard to see, does a lot of damage, and has Raised Lanes, which does a lot of the heavy lifting for him. Gold Rush is also pretty good, as mentioned before, and a fast boost plus Rocky Road can certainly cause some issues if he's trying to catch up, and in the lead, you're not going to have fun trying to dodge that move. Yeah, lightning kind of sucks, and force acceleration kind of sucks, and he's not the most common thing ever, but at the same time, when I see a treasure hunter Knuckles in the lobby, I generally dread what's about to happen, because sometimes it just feels like there's nothing you can do about Rocky Road, because you can't see it coming, and even if you do, you might not be able to dodge it. But yeah, Rocky Road, Rocky Road, Rocky Road. Big is a somewhat inconsistent but potentially very scary character to deal with due to the combination of a strong boost and a very powerful projectile. You may not realize it, but Chopper Chomp basically slows you down as much as Explosive Mines overall, and they have multiple pickups to boot. They may be slow, but one can end you, especially the Big's like right behind you or one catches you off guard. The boost is also good enough to pass someone with one use. His only real issue is that Lily Trap isn't exactly reliable. It's currently hurt by a glitch where it spawns in your lane, which is annoying, but he'd still be an A regardless. The main issue is that it tends to only really be helpful if you're catching someone off guard when it's swapping lanes, but hitting someone in front of you isn't the easiest thing. But then again, you have Chopper Chomps at someone in front of you. As long as you can aim that and aren't held back by too much by its speed, he can be helpful, but he's still not the most consistent character regardless. If Blizzard Bomb was a more reliable attack, Xena would be one of the absolute best characters in the game. And because the combination of that plus Explosive Mine hurts you more than just about any combo any character can throw at you. However, getting someone frozen on the ground with Blizzard Bomb is easier said than done because it has a low range and sometimes its hitbox just... I have no idea how to describe it. The lack of range and Electro Boost not being great near the end of the race can sometimes cause problems in terms of closing things off. Still, even if someone isn't frozen on the ground with Blizzard Bomb, they still get slowed down a lot, so you can still pass someone. And the rest of her kit isn't exactly bad. I mean, I'm almost glossing over Explosive Mines, even though they're great. She's probably should be used a little bit more. I don't see her that often, but good character overall, definitely. Next up, we got Lunar Blaze. Lunar Blaze is a character I didn't give nearly enough credit in the last tier list, mostly because it turns out Dragon Dance is an extremely useful attack. It may be slow and spamming sliding may sometimes work, but if used in the right spots, it can be pretty hard for people to dodge. It and Pyromine also make it very good at getting people very, very far behind, which is extremely important to all the Supersonics around. If you hit someone with Dragon Dance when it's coming back, they are done for, no matter what they have. She still has some flaws, she can't spread around her attacks, her boost is just okay. Sometimes the area of effect on Pyromine is not fun to deal with, but the high damage output and the fact that she can hit people so far behind her makes up for a lot of that. Next up, we got Darkspine Sonic. Other than Supersonic form, Speed Break might be the best boost in the entire game, but unlike other characters with overpowered boost, he actually does have some limiting factors. The slowdown whenever he uses his attacks sucks, and to make matters worse, Slow Burn is surprisingly not that impressive for a 3-lane attack that does fire damage. Overall, though, even if it was good, this means that the spam, pray, and clutch boost strategy that a lot of people will rely on simply cannot be done because you can't do the spam part. Still, if you're patient to throw your attacks, maybe just land a few attacks, and sometimes maybe just not attack at all. Just try to exist and then take optimal routes. That boost is going to win you a lot of games single-handedly. However, the fact that he cannot really be aggressive does hold him back from being higher than this. Next up, we got Vector. Vector, in spite of having invincibility, is actually pretty good, in part because if he had another boost, he'd probably be pretty overpowered. There's very little to complain about other than that. Fireball is a very good projectile, and Bubble Bombs in particular are very good. They hit hard, they're hard to see, they don't despawn upon hitting someone, they prevent immediate retaliation, so they're almost like better tornadoes sometimes. And then his stats are godlike, and even then, because of that, because his acceleration is pretty good, he's pretty fast, catching up with him doesn't feel like the worst thing ever like it does with Knuckles or Linebacker Omega. He's a character where if invincibility got a buff, he would definitely need a nerf because that's the one thing holding him back from being pretty broken. Next, we have Zavik. Zavik is a really devastating character in the right hands. In fact, someone actually recently hit 7k with him. Explosive Mines and Guaranteed Fireballs give him a simple-to-use, very hard-hitting kit. And although his speed may be relatively low, 9 acceleration and 10 speed basically make obstacles completely negligent, and Fire Boost feels actually pretty decent on him. He's basically just a complete tank. That being said, the low speed of the said boost catching out at just decent do hold him back from being truly S tier, as he's not the most versatile character out there. There's nothing about him that I think, oh my gosh, this is so broken. But few characters can spread around hard-hitting attacks as quickly, so he still has a spot in there. You can honestly even rank him in S, I just don't quite think he's there. And our final A tier character is Wave. Like Zavok, Wave is both effective and relatively easy to use, and has a pretty convenient rarity to boot. Whirlwinds are good, Explosive Mines are good, Area of Effect boosts are good. Wave has all three of those things and has good stat, meaning that she'll almost always be in a position where she can at least accomplish something. On paper, it's hard to think of a reason a character without that many downsides shouldn't be an S tier, and a lot of people do opt to climb with her if they're not using something overpowered, but as it stands, I also don't think she's not really the best at anything she does, nor does she particularly excel at any particular situation. Not really having attack I can point at and think, oh my gosh, this needs a nerf, which I know I just said that about Zavok, but I do think he's a little bit better than Zavok because I do think that AoE boosts almost might need a nerf. That being said, there's nothing wrong with being good in almost all situations. There's just nothing about her that just gives her a specific niche. She's just really just decent at everything. Starting off S tier, we have Tropical Storm. I nearly wanted to put him in A tier because of wind boost and the fact that Wipeout sometimes can't travel far enough to do damage, but I mean, he's still great. Ultimately, the best thing about him is that Wipeout is a strong 3-lane projectile, and Storm Cloud is something that you'll want to be worried about if there's a Wipeout coming, meaning that he can very easily get hits. Yeah, Wind Boost does suck, but I mean, that's his only real issue, and it's not like every character with Boost is bad. Also, his availability is bad, but I'm not considering that into his viability. Next up, we have the two Ice Wave characters, Jingle Ball Amy and Chaos. Ice Wave may not be the greatest projectile ever anymore, and Ice Boost is not great. Some characters have also ridiculous projectiles with way better boost, but Ice Wave is still great. It's 3 lanes, it's fast. Even if you're nearby a wall, you can end up draining people's rings in 20 rings, and then that does make up for the fact Ice Boost isn't that great because you could just end up keeping it and sandbagging with it. Of the two, I prefer Jingle Ball Amy because I think the Gift Trap works better in this meta right now. It's better making sure people can't creep up on you, and it also can be used in a combo with Ice Wave. Ice Wave plus Gift Trap can keep people off your back, but Chaos still has an advantage in that he has 10 speed, and Ice Mine does have some chain capabilities, and he's probably overall better at draining rings. It's a little bit up to preference, although I do think Jingle Ball Amy is the better of the two overall. Next is Metal Sonic. The combination of Steel and Explosive Mines almost ensure Metal Sonic will be successful in any metagame unless we get a Dark Spine Sonic dominated metagame because his attacks suck to seal. Anything your opponent can throw at you, Metal Sonic can use to both protect himself from getting hit by said attack and potentially use with some combination, probably with Explosive Mines or just on its own. Even a dominant character like Tangle can sometimes run into issue with a Metal Sonic just keep stealing or tail strikes, and even if you steal a kind of not very good move like Ice Mines, you still got amazing combinations like Ice Mining someone into an Explosive Mine. When the worst part about you is Electric Boost, you're probably pretty dang good. That being said, the flaws that Electric Boost has and the lack of consistent projectile can make him sometimes not work, but he's been one of the best characters in this game for a long time for a reason, and even though he's lower than ever, he still does work, and probably always will. Next up, we got Baby Sonic. Baby Sonic only really has one trick up his sleeve, but it's a very good trick. With 50 starting rings and the ability to go under Storm Clouds, and no other character even capable of starting with 40 starting rings, he can body block about any character in the game to prevent his low stats, mediocre boost, which still grants AoE, so it's not bad, and Singular Whirlwind from causing too many issues. And then he can just front run, play some interesting Storm Cloud placements anywhere that he doesn't have to worry about because of his natural ability, and then he wins. He is a little bit track dependent. There are some tracks like Spiral Heights where I just don't think Storm Clouds are good at all. But even if he doesn't attack, he doesn't necessarily have to be landing attacks because he starts with so many rings. Very good character overall once you figure out how to use him. Next is Tidal Wave. Now, you might be surprised I'm putting her ahead of Tropical Storm by a few spots because I've been a lot more generous towards Storm Clouds than I have towards Ice Mines throughout this, and you may be wondering, why is that necessarily good? Well, it comes down to a few things. For one, she has Wrench Rush coming off of pretty good acceleration, which makes it much, much better than Wind Boost. And also, Ice Mines are a pretty good combination with Wipeout, and hey, Wipeout's a good attack. Yeah, sometimes you can't really quite hold off people, but Wipeout is very good at making sure people don't pass you, which is very nice, and something that a lot of other Ice Mine characters don't have. And even though putting her ahead of Wei might be bold, I actually do think just Wipeout and a good boost is just that good of a combination. Very good character overall. In the rare occasions she gets an event, I see someone I'd recommend you potentially invest in. Infinite has a whole bunch of good traits and one very bad trait. Let's get the bad thing out of the way first. The boost is awful. It pretty much, you can only use it one time the whole game. It's not nearly as good as Supersonic's boost, and it does make it so he cannot stay in the pack where he is at his best. With aggressive play, though, to make sure you don't fall back and try not to be hit by an explosive attack, he can be very, very devastating. Reality Warp might be the most broken projectile in the game, especially when the Infinite is nearby you. It's very hard to dodge, and it travels just slow enough for it to be a harder time. Deadly Replica, remember I'm talking about these characters at max, is quite jank at max. It can land right on top of someone it's not even targeting, and it can flood the track if the Infinite is in the lead, giving him a pretty good front-running tool. He also has, of course, that illusion effect, which can ruin the game for some characters, and he also probably has the best stats in the game with a perfect 10 in speed and acceleration. A lot of good traits, but that boost is a huge problem, and it's impossible to rank him higher than this despite that. Rounding out S tier, we got Reaper Metal Sonic. Reaper Metal Sonic might be the best front-running character in the game that does not have a way of boosting it first. Dead ends being multiple pickups and not despawning is incredibly helpful at holding off sandbagging players, especially Supersonics, even if getting frozen isn't the end of the world. And thanks to Harvest Time, he can both stop people trying to boost past him and get in the position to front row dead end very early. What stops him from being higher, despite the fact that he is very much so a meta character, is that he can run into situations where he struggles. A Metal Sonic that is not nearby you and is not the player directly behind you literally cannot touch you, and Ice Boost is the most impressive thing in the world. Although, what leaves him high in S tier is that he does have ways of dealing with it. You have to be patient. You may just don't be a complete idiot with him and you'll probably eventually catch up. Sometimes he's screwed, but a lot of times he can do a lot of things well, and ultimately, he's the only way you're going to stop certain characters from catching back up. Now that we're into the X tier, I should point out that the X and the Z tier, I'm going to be pointing out nerfs I like these characters, these remaining dozen characters to have, because I do think they all present massive issues in this metagame. Everybody else I pointed out to this point is like, yeah, some of them are very good, but I think they're fair. But everybody else at this point, I think, really needs to be addressed. To begin, we have Mephiles, or if you want to believe that guy, Mephiles. Mephiles might be the worst character in the game to have behind you when you're in first. As the only character in the game with a triple pickup 3-lane attack, alongside what's basically a King's Judgment with triple pickups, dodging his attacks throughout the game just isn't realistic. His boost, although it's not particularly impressive, does grant invincibility and is decent enough to boost past someone, so he can still do work with that. But ultimately, it's mostly just a spam. You will hit a lot of people, and because he can hit so many people, you can't just be patient and end up winning. What holds him back is that he's a relatively poor front-running character, but I do think this is just a bunch of overwhelming traits. If I had to change one thing about him, I don't think triple pickup 3-lane attack should ever be a thing. That's a thing that only Mephiles has, and I just don't think you can really do anything about that. It's just not realistic to dodge. I would do something about this. Maybe decrease Stalking Shade's pickups to 2. I think 3 is a little bit too much when it's not lightning. And then maybe we can talk about there being a ring damage when you just hit somebody. Because I do acknowledge that the front-running issues can be pretty bad, and I guess not draining rings can be pretty bad, especially against Supersonic, which, as you may have guessed by now, I am not a fan of characters who are not good against Supersonic. So he just needs a lot of changes, but overall I still think he's generally a little bit overwhelming. Next is Sir Lancelot. Sir Lancelot might seem to be a little bit out of place in this tier, because at a glance you may look at him and think, wait, nothing about this guy is particularly problematic, but it's really the combination of traits that put him over the edge. The boost is arguably top 5, and while the boost alone does not make a character good, see Nutcracker Silver, Storm Clouds are a very good trap, and Clayhouse Slides is a pretty underrated tool that has a generally reliable hitbox, with both the sword and the ensuing projectile. If Lancelot had a worse kit or a worse boost, he wouldn't be there, but as a whole, you have a character that has a boost much better than your typical character with this type of kit, and that does present problems. It feels like sometimes there is nothing you can do about a Lancelot just clutch boosting you, and he still has all the good traits of someone like Shadow, who is good with just Storm Clouds. Again, nothing he really does ruins the game, but I do think his boost needs a major nerf. It could be an average boost or even just a good one. I remember it being in what I consider a reasonable enough state before they, for some reason, buffed it. And he was a pretty comfortable S-tier character. I would revert it to that because, again, even though I don't think he just completely ruins things, he still is, in my opinion, just a step above where a character should be. Next is Movie Knuckles. Movie Knuckles has a very good combination of speed and power, although 3 acceleration is terrible. Ring Portal is a very good boost that limits how much this will be an issue. And Fearless Strike is a strong attack with use of utility, despite picking out a double pickup. Honestly, it's a very powerful move in spite of not being triple. And then there's Spear Trap. Spear Trap is a hard-hitting move that can hit far away and is difficult to dodge. Now, while that may seem similar to Flu Shot, what makes Movie Knuckles in this tier rather than lower is because Spear Trap is like a jank version of Flu Shot. Part of why it's so hard to dodge is because the hitbox shows up before the attack shows up, or before the raised spears do, meaning that if one shows up, you often have to guess, hey, is this lane free? You often have no way of knowing it, and if you guess wrong, you take EMI damage, even if you look like you jumped over it. Really, I want this move to be more of a reskin of Flu Shot. I'd also make it so then the damage scales properly. I think it does max damage as soon as you unlock it, and then all the other upgrades are completely useless. I would, again, if it was a Flu Shot reskin, then this immediate hitbox wouldn't happen, and these things wouldn't be useless. And he'd still be a very good character without that, so I really don't know why this is the case. As it stands, though, because he can stop pretty much any character from getting away because of the guesswork required by Spear Trap, he is, in my opinion, a pretty comfortable X-tier character. Next is Unicorn Creep, one of the most detestable characters in the entire game, if not the, and it all comes down to Rainbow Blast. Let's go through Rainbow Blast's good traits. It's fast, it's a 3-lane attack, it goes through walls, obstacles, and all that stuff only being stopped by other players. And the worst part is that it is by design luck-based to dodge. You can usually slide under it, but sometimes you're supposed to jump over it. Which one are you supposed to do? I have no idea. How are you supposed to react to it in general anyway when it comes so fast and there's no way of doing it? I have no idea. Yeah, it's not particularly strong, but it still does enough damage you can just boost past someone after you hit it, which you almost certainly do because there's no reliable way to dodge this move. There's no way to even hide from it. And the boost also prevents people from boosting past it to take advantage of what Rainbow Blast is doing, provided they don't also have invincibility. Her only flaw is damage output, but that really doesn't matter if you have Rainbow Blast. So, overall, if you couldn't get the impression, I think Unicorn Creep needs a serious Rainbow Blast nerf. First of all, I would make it have a consistent dodging method, and second of all, I would make it so you can it doesn't go through obstacles. I think that both these things make it overwhelming. You may be thinking, wait, how am I supposed to hit people with it otherwise? Well, I've seen this argument a few times, but I think this argument is dumb because there's literally no other attack that does even more than 2 of these things, and I mean, people can land any of these hits anyway. And again, even if it's not the strongest attack in the game, with how easy it is to hit people with, all we really need to do is chip damage for that boost, which again is basically power sneakers with a side effect to get the job done. I hate this character. Rounding out X tier, we have Werehog. Werehog is the first of 3 what I consider, or many others consider, mini boost characters. Essentially characters that can boost without using their own boost and without hitting anyone. All of these characters cause problems. I don't think there's any scenario where you should get any amount of speed in first without having some sort of implication of hitting someone, because just you can end up being in first and then making a getaway. Werehog is the least broken of them though, and I think he's comfortably, but I still hate him. The thing is that with Dark Blast, it doesn't give you as much speed as quickly. I mean, if you stay in it the entire time, maybe it can be kind of similar to having a bunch of Tail Strikes or the lunge move that Percival has, but ultimately, you do have to at least stay in your lane, and this can be taken advantage of, which is nice, but I mean, that still is a thing. He still has Storm Clouds, he has an AoE boost, and the thing I hate about him the most, though, is that Dark Blast actually can stack with Feral Boost, which can make a pretty devastating, very fast combination. Even if he's not creeping up on you, there's not really much you can do about this. In my opinion, this might be fine if they couldn't stack, although honestly, I feel like I would prefer Dark Blast being just a useful offensive tool. Maybe like have it to where it just does a lot more damage, travels further, but doesn't give a speed boost at all. Then maybe call it a day. I also in general think slowing others down as opposed to speeding yourself up would be generally less problematic and also a lot more fitting for a character like Werehog. If you want to keep this mini boost aspect though, I would get rid of the fact these can stack. Again, I don't think he's as bad as some of these other characters can be, but I still think he's pretty blatantly overpowered because I still think he has something that I don't think belongs in the game. If you thought I disliked those last characters, here's Z tier, the final frontier, my least favorite characters in the game and characters who are just so broken it's not even funny. Starting off, we have both Supersonics. Despite the lack of a shield, poor stats, and having a really basic kit share with C or even an E tier character, Supersonic form single-handedly can make any character a top tier threat. With enough starting rings, barring certain matchups, getting hit a ton, honestly, you have to be ganged up on or just be straight up hunted by a player. And honestly, hackers, you have a free win button regardless of what else the kit is. I rank Movie Sonic, Supersonic ahead because he gets a slight edge due to Whirlwinds being able to give him more rings. And Zap Trap, I hate the fact Zap Trap is a positive is crazy, but you can honestly cause issues to more people because of it. Whereas, even though I like Supersonic's kit more for a general sense, I think that Movie Supersonics is better for a super form, and he also doesn't have quite as low of a strength stat. So, overall, they're also characters that I really don't like from a design standpoint. They're stupid broken at a high level, but in some cases, they're also bad at a low level. But the thing is that they so massively warp every game they're in, and because it's Supersonic, and possibly because people want these free wins, there are so many of them in every single game. That being said, as annoying as I think they are, I mostly only hate them once they're maxed out. Before that, he's just a character I just don't think should ever have 30 starting rings. 20 starting rings is still a problem, but it's not like super duper broken. I think that Hard Light should consider making it so then before level 16, instead of maybe having 5 ring boosts, you may like, hey, maybe go from 15 to 17 to 20. And then maybe also from there have it to where if Supersonic gets hit, maybe he doesn't completely stop his boost, but he still at least loses rings, so he's at least forced to dodge things, because there's nothing worse than having a Supersonic wherein he can just... It's just, hey, he's in this situation, I've literally already lost because there's nothing I can do about it, not even place my traps, because he's just gonna boost for 10 seconds and win. And then I think that this would just make it so he has to play a little bit more carefully. A lot of them play very recklessly because they're allowed to. And I think that just both these need to happen, so then Supersonic doesn't just already lined up so where he wins as long as he doesn't make too many mistakes. Another pair of characters that are next are Punk Zaz and DJ Vector, collectively known as the Band. I don't need to tell you why this boost is broken. It lasts like 8 seconds long. You have unlimited lane swipes. I don't know why they gave Cream her restriction to that boost, but not these guys. And it gives a silence effect if they collide with someone. Yeah, this boost is broken. You can be behind someone, boost past them, and get so far ahead that then they have a boost now and have to worry about that type of stuff. It's by far the biggest reason they're up in this tier, and with a balanced boost they would not be, but it's not the only thing they have going for them is the thing either. Stormcloud and Tornado are very solid traps. Their stats are quite high, and Audio Assault is low-key, really kind of broken. It's a triple pickup attack that goes as fast as Fireball, goes through walls, and causes a silence effect too. Yeah, it's pretty broken if you ask me. Which one you prefer is up to preference. I personally prefer DJ Vector because I think Stormclouds are generally more useful, but if you told me Punk's ass was better and told me, hey, Tornadoes are better, it's just the characters that has them, then you know what, fair enough, but I don't know. Both these characters really feel the same to me and are abused for the same reason. If they want to keep this lane swiping thing, then maybe go the route of Cream. Honestly, I would give Bunny Boost unlimited swipes even with that increased speed, and then give Beat and Base Boost limited swipes. If you have to time it, then why not have it? Why not have people make it time it to where, hey, figure out when to use these swipes. And then even if it does give you a decent amount of things, you still have to time it to where you have to avoid the walls and traps and stuff like that. So sometimes you might not be able to time it correctly. So I think that if they transferred the one trait to that boost, then maybe it might be okay. And then also, I think they need to decrease the pickups on Audio Assault. I don't know if it's even supposed to have triple pickups because the upgrade description doesn't mention that, but honestly, it's powerful enough if you give it one tool. I think you do both of these things, it'd be a little bit more interesting characters as opposed to just boost to win and then maybe sandbag and sit in the back and spam. They are definitely characters that encourage that type of playstyle, which I do not like. Next, we have Movie Tales. Movie Tales has frustrated me so much because of Hardlight's refusal to properly nerf this guy. I know the patch will say, oh, they decrease Twin Tail boosts speed, but no, if you look at comparison videos, it is almost exactly the same as it was before. At least in Max. I'm not sure about other levels, but I know it is the case in Max because of somebody who has a level 15 Movie Tales posting it as such, but overall, this character is just, can clutch boost you so easily. Another character can just sit in the back and spam a bunch of moves, namely Whirlwind, which I've never hated Whirlwind as much until Movie Tales showed up, but when this guy can just use unlimited amounts of them, you can't hit him back, and then when he gets in the lead, then he can just spam EMP Shield, which if you're near EMP Shield, you're also not going to pass him. So it's like Linebacker Omega, except he has 10 acceleration instead of 4, an actually good projectile, and then his boost is ridiculous instead of being terrible. And then he can still keep you out of passing him, even though there's no AoE effect and he only picks up 1. But even then, that silence effect is brutal. If there's one trying to gatekeep you, he will. Very few characters can give me more annoyance than Movie Tales because he's also a character that a lot of bad people flock to. Which is, hey, there's a Movie Tales like 5.9k, instead of boosting, they're going to just be annoying with Whirlwind spam and EMP shield you, and now you cannot possibly catch up and you can't retaliate because he can't be hit, and because he can't be hit, and because his boost lasts so long, maybe he can keep it to first. This character would be so much more balanced if they would just get rid of the invincibility entirely on the boost. He already floats. He doesn't need to also have invincibility because I just think that, hey, he needs to have some flaw. Make it not easy for him to just easily take back first, because I don't think a character with a tool like EMP Shield should be able to easily get up there. Especially when, at the start of the game, you can honestly just move around a lot and then just basically do what Harvest Time can do, but honestly, it holds people back more than that because of the silence effect. Again, it's just an extremely obnoxious character, and really, I think it all starts and ends with the boost. Even though he has a lot of other traits, if his boost was even just balanced, he'd be so much easier to deal with because it just enables everything else to be so problematic. So even if they get rid of the invincibility of this boost, I still think they'd even need to decrease the duration, because he can still float over stuff, but I just think you need to at least be able to hit him to start off. In second place, we got Sir Percival. Sir Percival just basically takes every single thing that makes a character annoying, combines it into one. She has a mini boost in Levitate Lunge, she has a Lava Bomb, which is extremely useful, and she has an AoE boost, when also has some of the best stats in the game. Percival is a character you can say has very few, if not no, flaws, and very few, if not no, disadvantages situations. He's pretty much very good in every single situation. Levitate Lunge in particular, I think, is way too powerful of a tool. It does good damage, can allow Sir Percival to creep up on someone, allow her to make a getaway, etc. Lava Bomb just makes it harder to catch up to her. If one hits you and one is getting away, you are not going to come back from that because it's already hard enough to do that. It also makes it so she can just creep up on you and then use that AoE boost, which, again, AoE boosts are kind of annoying already, but when someone can get right behind you and then AoE boost past you, what are you supposed to do? Pretty much nothing. And so that means that if she wants to pass you, or if she wants to at least get second against you, then she can do that, and Lava Bomb can also, I didn't even mention what it can do to help close any gap that those mini boosts and the AoE boost can't deal with. So overall, Percival is just a ridiculous character. I think there are two things I would do with this character. For one, I think that if you are going to keep mini boost, you should cap Lavatain Lunge to one pickup. Two is just simply too powerful. It just makes it so she can catch up way too easily and almost get a free boost to keep that AoE boost, and that's just too powerful to easily sandbag. We've seen with, honestly, pre-nerf Way why that's such an issue, if there's such a AoE boost that can easily pass first place. I also think on top of that, her stats should be lowered. I don't get why she has 10 acceleration. Blaze has 4, Tangle has 5, Werehog has 5, and I just think that her boot stats need to be way lower to even remotely justify why this character has this trait. So overall, I just think that she needs a lot of nerfs, and even though I don't really have much else to say. And finally, the number one spot, breaking the streak of like a bajillion specials, we have Tangle. With Werehog out of the picture and no longer completely shutting her down, Tangle takes the top spot since she is way too fast and way too simple to use and way too hard to deal with. Not only is she this easy to use, but she's also so broken that not even other broken characters can deal with her. The only reason I didn't rank Movie Tails first, and I forgot to mention this during his section, is because Movie Tails, he loses to Supersonic a lot, and he loses to Tangle because he can't really close that gap. And then speaking of Supersonic, if there's a Tangle, Supersonic is just not going to close that gap because he can't boost to close that gap because already a lot of the roster has to start boosting just to mildly keep up with double tail strike spam, which, by the way, there's a lot of item boxes you might be able to pick up 4 of. Characters often cannot close this gap, especially if it's only like Wind Boost or Ice Boost or something mediocre. And it can be very hard to get a hit off on her if you just cannot get the timing right. And then also like Percival, she can keep on doing it. She can do so easily. I've seen games where she gets Explosive Mind repeatedly, or even hit near the end, and then just up 4 tail strikes later and a tail spring later, she just boosts past everyone and wins. Because, like, what are you supposed to do about that? And then if she creeps up on you, you literally cannot hit her while she's boosting because, of course, it gives invincibility and it's fast. And then she doesn't even have to worry about aiming because it's just her entire kit is boost. So not only that, she's just extremely... This is why she's so easy to use. You don't have to worry about if somebody's good at dodging because you never have to worry about hitting them. So even though... and then even Percival struggles against her because, like, even though, again, I think Percival is nearly flawless, she can't really do anything if Tangle is just picking up more tail strikes as she can Lavatain lunges. So, absolutely ridiculous character overall. And honestly, this may be bold, but in order to nerf her, if you want to keep the mini boost aspect, I honestly think you could nerf the pickup rate to 1, and she'd be fine. Look, I get that 1 isn't the best at a low level, but, like, why are you using a low-level character in the first place anyway? Characters should be balanced. If a lot of these characters aren't even viable at max level, I don't think it would be fair if Tangle was just like, oh, we can't nerf her because she might not be good at low level. Like, have you used Bruises or Storm at a low level? Oh my goodness, it was so bad. You know, maybe even have her have 1 Tail Strike and replace the other Tail Strike with something else. And then, even if you don't want to do all that, then, like, maybe just increase the damage for the upgrades instead of increasing the amount of pickups, because, again, it's just too powerful of a tool, and honestly, I prefer she had a trap, because, like, if she did, then maybe she'd have to aim, worry about things in that manner, instead of just being just boost, cheap. This is the hardest I have seen people get carried. There are people, honestly, who have gotten 7k or closing in 7k that I don't think deserve it at all, and it's all because they use Tangle, and they are so much worse without her. This is the most broken character in the game if she's a one-trick pony, because it's just something that so many characters have no way of dealing with at all. So these balance changes, when I was making this and saw there was server maintenance, I was thinking, okay, maybe they'll have some balance changes that I might need to do some adjustments, but there's a lot of them. Every single rare, most super rares, about half the specials and infinite are all getting things adjusted about them, as well as there is a bigger change to the very fundamentals of how starting rings work. So let's begin, I guess, with that. Rares now start with 10 rings level 1. Super rares now start with 20 rings in level 1, and so do specials and challengers. Super rares will also get an upgrade for all their moves. These supers, their upgrade path is being adjusted for more rings, but they start with 0, unlike other specials, and Rouge now has Whirlwind instead of Lightning. I like the latter, but the rest of the stuff is, oh boy. So, I'm not very high in the commons. I think you can tell that from where I put them on this list. And now they're just going to be completely useless, honestly. There's no way they can keep up with somebody who has 55 starting rings, and they have 35 and worse moves. The rares, 45 isn't great. I'm not the biggest fan of having 10 fewer rings, but they all got buffs. Literally all of them got buffs for some reason. To compensate for this, Commons just got nothing, though. And I guess we'll have to see with Super. Again, I don't like that he gets too many rings. I've been against 30 starting rings, and now what? He's going to get like 50 starting rings at one point? Ugh. It's already the max ones I don't like, so this kind of just adds on to the problem. Now certain characters will start behind him if so, but I guess Whirlwind instead of Lightning actually does address part of the problems I had with Rouge. Rouge is just really bad, and no more Lightning Booby Trap combo, so that's pretty nice. Now, in terms of what the rares are getting, Fire Whirl's getting a buff. I like that. Bunny Boost duration of speed increased at low levels and reduced at high. I don't get that. Bunny Boost is terrible. That also goes for Spring Cream. Confusion Mine damage is higher. Fine. SBO's kind of meh. Biostress damage is increasing, which, you know, fine, but I don't know. I prefer a Wind Boost buff. Booby Trap cost increase. I don't know about this one. Booby Trap is pretty hefty in terms of cost, and with Whirlwind, I can see Roots being a minor issue. Zap Trap buff is happening. Its damage is being increased. Not the biggest fan of this either, in part because Move is Supersonic gets buffed. Tail Spring speed increase. Why are you buffing Tangle? Oh, I hate it. I know she doesn't have as many starting rates as other guys, but I've seen level 12 Tangles give me a lot of issues and climb pretty high, so it's not like she needs that. Bubble Bomb damage is increased, another buff that I really think they should have given to Invincibly. Bubble Bomb didn't need a buff. Vector's fine. Wrench Rush speed increase. This also buffs Tidal Wave, which is two very good characters. And Green Hover speed was increased. I mean, half of these rares were bad, but like some of them were already good, so like I don't know why they're doing this. They should have only buffed the ones that are like legitimately bad, which is about half of them. As for super rares, I don't know what the upgraded item at level 1 constitutes as, but Chopper Challenge speed increase, which, I know I rank Brig pretty high, but fair enough. He's like not the best. Rocket Boost speed increases, Missile Launch damage increases, Chase speed increases. All of these I don't see changing things. Gamma's still gonna suck, and we've seen Rocket Boost and Chao space speed increases. I can honestly not tell them. Boost speed buffs in general are just really hard to tell when they happen, so even Wrench Rush and Tail Spring might not happen, which is fine because those characters are like actually problems. Zaz is getting a buff. Star Trail drops are increased and the damage is increased, which is nice. I would prefer I prefer a duration increase over a damage increase, but I mean Zaz really needed the help. And Blizzard Bomb damage is reduced, which is kind of weird. I don't really see it using up, but whatever. The main thing I'm concerned about, though, is 55 starting rings on some of these guys. Like Metal Sonic, oh my gosh, you could just start so far ahead of some characters and just... What do you do? It's just very difficult, and honestly, I mean, these buffs are fine, I just don't think they'll do enough. And then you have the specials. Gawain's getting a big buff. Dual Wheel Dash pickup rate is increased and its damage is higher. Gale Meteor has higher pickup rates and the damage increases. This might make Gawain a threat. Again, I don't think he's bad. Now he might actually be pretty good. Kind of scary, honestly. Blazing Aura now takes time to accelerate. This is fine. I'd honestly just prefer, you know, her acceleration is lower, but I mean, that's good. But, you know, they still have the pickups, which is the main issue. Bat Bomb pickup rate was increased, and for her and THK, the Gold Rush speed duration speed was increased, which, I don't know. I don't really know if this was necessary. Home Run, Regular, and Final Pads speed boost was increased, and the duration they remain on the track is increased. Speed is pretty necessary. Now, here's the thing. If they got rid of the stacking, I think this would need a buff. Not sure about it then, although I don't even know if they're aware of it. Wipeout now starts on 3 lanes at level 1. Fair enough, I just hope this move doesn't become too broken high enough. That means Tidal Wave got 2 buffs, a top 15 character, by the way. Brutal Barrier speed decrease. I honestly couldn't even tell you got a speed increase. I've never seen that happen, so this is a weird one. Quarterback Zavic's boost no longer loses speed when upgraded. Fair. Nobody uses Quarterback Zavic, but I feel like that's just because he's Quarterback Zavic. All Classic Sonic stats were moved from 10.65 to 10.76. Decent buff. Again, I think his stats are a little bit too low. Movie Tails, EMP shields, damage was reduced at a high level, increased at low. Twin Tail boost, same way. For speed, I don't know about this one because Twin Tail boost has gotten like 3 speed nerfs, and again, as I mentioned, if you compare them, they look the same. Infinite has reduced replica damage, his boost was reduced in terms of speed, his projectile speed was reduced. I think this is a little harsh. The only thing I didn't like was Double Deadly Replica personally, and that wasn't even addressed, so he might be kind of bad now, honestly. Longclaw, for Cyclone Charge, got a bunch of buffs. The trap damage was increased, the duration was increased, the boosts you get from it increased, and you get pickup chances. This makes this move pretty dang good. I guess I didn't want to buff Lightning or Wind Boost, because God forbid you help out Amy and Tails and characters like that. For Werehog, he got quite a few changes. Dark Blast gets fewer pickups, but the damage was increased, which is kind of along the lines of what I was saying. Just don't... Honestly, Dark Blast is not that bad when you only get 1. It's 2 that's kind of an issue. I didn't mention that, but yeah. Boost speed is going to be increased at a low level and decreased the higher one, which is very strange to me. And the damage is reduced. All this might be nice. I don't know. And then Reaper Metal Sonic got hit pretty hard. Harvest time is damage is increased at the low levels and reduced at high, which I don't know how that's going to work. Level 6 and 12 harvest time are already the same. Does that mean it just gets worse? Dead end duration on the track was reduced. The 2 times pickup rates are reduced. 3 times pickup rates are reduced at a high level and reduced a low. This is just very strange. Why are all these changes that are worse at a high level and better at a low level and worse at a high level? Very strange to me. And there's just so much wrong. And like, again, this starting ring thing throws a huge wrench in things because this indirectly buffs a lot of characters. There are a lot of characters, like, where are their changes? Tangle getting a buff, kind of, but Tangle gets a buff, kind of, which I do not like at all. But at the same time, like, she does have fewer starting rings, which, like, why did they buff her? Does that imply that she's as good as the other rares? That's clearly not the case. You don't have to take my word for it. Movie Tails is getting a kind of piddling one. Supersonic is getting a rework, but it's not the one I want because I don't want it to be so reliant on this boost. The band, nothing. Lancelot, nothing. Unicorn Cream, I actually forgot to mention that she got a change. The Rainbow Blast range was reduced, which is nice because, my god, some Unicorn Creams are annoying. But, like, there's no Movie Knuckles change, there's no Mephiles change, it's just like, why? And then some of the buffs and nerfs they got are just so strange. So then, like, and then all these characters can start with 55 rings, so, like, what do you do? I don't know how this is gonna work. Honestly, I was planning on quitting the game because I did not like the top dozen or so characters, and this honestly just sounds like it's gonna make the game worse. I'm seeing in the Hardlight server more thumbs downs than thumbs ups, but it's gonna happen, it's inevitable. People didn't like the boost changes either, but they happen anyway. And now we're getting this. I think this is going to shake up the meta in a negative way. Again, commons are just going to be useless. It's going to be even more dominated by high-level specials. The only character who is top tier that doesn't have 55 starting rings now at a max level is Tangle, but you can do perfectly well without 55 because you have like 20 billion tail strikes still, and now her boost is buffed. It just almost seems like they randomly assign these buffs and nerfs, and while it does help some good characters, a lot of characters that really need help are just got nothing, or they're getting piddling stuff, like Amy, nothing. Movie Sonic, nothing aside from starting ranks. Excalibur Sonic, same deal. Ice Slicer Jet's still going to be bad. Really, every common is bad. Just completely awful. Like, I don't know why you use Amy nowadays when she has no starting rings, and it makes me feel uneasy. I kind of want to monitor where things are. Maybe I'm wrong and the things turn out to be fun. If that's the case, then hey, maybe I come back to the game. But for now, I'm still planning on potentially stepping away. I'm going to be trying to keep this channel alive by doing other content. Maybe trying to set up a Let's Play, but I'll need to move first. I'm moving to an apartment in a few weeks, and I kind of need to take care of that first. I think I have the proper mic setup to do other things, which Yeah, let's hope for that, but I hope that I'm wrong about these balance changes and they end up improving the game, but at a glance, they do not look like they will improve things, and I'm really worried about this game's future, even more than I already was. So, let's hope that things aren't too ridiculous and that, you know, the ones they have are fine, but any balance patch that has DJ Vector not addressed and also, like, really bad characters not addressed, I'm not looking forward to it, and I think a lot of people aren't either. But we'll see. Anyway, I'll see you next time, and once again, I thank you for sitting through this outdated tier lists.